My name is Ladonna Williams, 72 years old, and I never thought I would have to set a trap for my own son. When I felt the cool draft from the hallway at 3 a.m., I already knew what was happening. My special drawer was being opened, the one with the credit card I left there intentionally. By morning, $20,000 vanished on first-class tickets and diamond earrings for his wife. Everyone was shocked, but not me. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from, and give this a like if you have ever been betrayed by family. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. After becoming a widow at 50, I never imagined I would face betrayal from the one person I sacrificed everything for. My husband Thomas passed away suddenly from a heart attack, leaving me to raise our only son Jake, who was just starting high school. We had a modest savings account, but not nearly enough to cover college expenses and maintain our lifestyle. I had always worked part-time at a local flower shop, while Thomas was the primary breadwinner with his accounting practice. After his death, I had to reinvent myself. With determination and countless sleepless nights, I built a small catering business from scratch, starting with neighborhood functions and gradually expanding to corporate events. Every dollar I earned went toward giving Jake the best opportunities in life. Our relationship was beautiful back then. Jake was a bright, compassionate teenager who seemed to understand the sacrifices I was making. He would help me prepare for catering jobs, often staying up late to assist with food preparation. On weekends, we would sit at our kitchen table planning his future. He dreamed of becoming an architect, and I promised him I would make that happen no matter what. When Jake was accepted to a prestigious university with a partial scholarship, I mortgaged our home to cover the remaining tuition. Those 4 years were challenging, but I never let Jake know how much I struggled. I wanted him to focus on his studies without worrying about finances. During his college years, Jake would call me every Sunday, sharing stories about his classes and new friends. Each conversation reinforced that all my sacrifices were worthwhile. Everything changed when Jake met Amanda during his final year of college. She was studying business administration and came from a wealthy family. She was beautiful, intelligent, and ambitious. When Jake first brought her home during spring break, I noticed how she assessed our modest house with subtle disapproval. During dinner, she repeatedly mentioned her parents' vacation home in Florida and their annual trips to Europe. Jake graduated with honors and secured a position at a respectable architecture firm. I was so proud watching him walk across that stage, knowing I had fulfilled my promise to Thomas. 6 months later, Jake announced his engagement to Amanda. I welcomed her into our family with open arms, despite my private concerns about her materialistic tendencies. The first signs of trouble appeared shortly after their wedding. Jake called me one evening, sounding stressed. He explained that he and Amanda had found the perfect starter home, but they needed $20,000 for the down payment. Without hesitation, I withdrew the money from my retirement account and gave it to them. Jake promised to repay me within a year. A year passed, then 2. No repayment came, but the requests continued. $10,000 for furniture, $8,000 for unexpected house repairs, $15,000 for Amanda to start a small online boutique. Each time Jake would explain how this would be the last time he needed help, how this investment would secure their financial independence. Then came the trip that planted the first seeds of suspicion. 3 months after Jake had called asking for $12,000 to fix a supposedly collapsing foundation in their home, I saw photos on Amanda's social media page of them enjoying a luxury vacation in Italy. Smiling faces against the backdrop of Venice canals, dining at exclusive restaurants, Amanda sporting a new designer handbag in each photo. When they returned, I casually asked about their trip during Sunday dinner. Jake looked momentarily startled, then composed himself. "Oh, that was actually a work trip, Mom," he said smoothly. "My firm sent me to study European architecture, and they covered most expenses. Amanda just came along for the experience." I nodded, pretending to accept this explanation, but inside doubt had taken root. I checked with a friend whose son worked in architecture. Such trips were indeed common, but they rarely included spouses, and certainly not at five-star accommodations. That night alone in my bedroom, I scrolled through years of financial transactions. In total, I had given Jake over $150,000 since his graduation, money that was supposed to sustain me through my retirement years, money I had earned through countless catering events, sore feet and back pain that now required regular physical therapy. I felt a complex mix of emotions wash over me. Disappointment in Jake for taking advantage of my generosity. Anger at Amanda for seemingly encouraging this behavior. But mostly, I felt disappointed in myself. Had I raised my son to view me as an ATM rather than a mother, had my willingness to sacrifice everything created, an entitled young man who saw nothing wrong with deceiving me. I called my younger sister Linda that night, tears streaming down my face as I confessed my suspicions. She had warned me years ago about giving Jake too much too easily. Now, her gentle "I told you so" felt like both a comfort and a reproach. "Ladonna, you have always been too generous for your own good," she said softly. "First with Thomas, then with Jake. It's time you start thinking about yourself." I knew she was right, but breaking patterns established over decades would not be easy. Jake was my only child, my connection to Thomas, and despite everything, I loved him dearly. I wanted to believe there was an explanation for everything, that my son would never deliberately take advantage of me. Looking back now, I realize I was standing at a crossroads. I could continue down the path of blind maternal love, or I could open my eyes to the painful reality that my son had changed. That night I chose to keep my eyes closed just a little longer, not yet ready to face the truth about the young man I had raised. The shift from Jake asking for money to taking it without permission happened so gradually that I almost missed it. Almost. It began with small things disappearing from my home. A silver picture frame that had belonged to my mother. A pair of pearl earrings Thomas had given me on our 20th anniversary. When I mentioned these items to Jake during his visits, he would help me search, suggesting I had misplaced them or that perhaps one of the catering staff I occasionally hired had sticky fingers. Then came the day I discovered the first major betrayal. I was organizing my jewelry box before a charity gala when I realized my diamond tennis bracelet was missing. This wasn't an item I would misplace. Thomas had given it to me on our last anniversary before his death, and I only wore it on special occasions. I called Jake immediately, not to accuse him, but to ask if I had perhaps left it at his house during my last visit. The long pause before his answer told me everything. "I haven't seen it, Mom," he finally said, "but you know you have been a bit forgetful lately. Remember when you couldn't find your car keys and they were in the refrigerator?" That isolated incident had happened after I had worked a 36-hour catering job with no sleep. The way Jake used it to cast doubt on my mental acuity felt calculated and cruel. The next day, I visited 3 local pawn shops. At the third one, the owner recognized the description of my bracelet immediately. He pulled out his record book and showed me the transaction. Jake had sold it 6 weeks earlier for $4,000 less than a third of its value. I felt physically ill looking at my son's signature on that pawn ticket. The owner, seeing my distress, offered to hold the bracelet if I wanted to buy it back. I wrote him a check on the spot, the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders. That evening, I invited Jake over for dinner alone without Amanda. I placed the bracelet on the dining room table between us. The color drained from his face when he saw it. "I can explain?" he stammered. "Please do," I said quietly. What followed was a convoluted story about unexpected medical bills that he didn't want to burden me with, how he had intended to buy the bracelet back before I noticed it missing. When I asked what medical issue had cost $4,000, his explanation grew increasingly vague. "Jake," I interrupted, "I'm not angry. I'm concerned. If you're in trouble, financial or otherwise, I want to help. But I need the truth." He broke down then, admitting he had gambling debts. Online poker had started as a hobby, but spiraled out of control. The bracelet was just one of several items he had pawned to cover his losses. He swore he would get help attend Gamblers Anonymous and pay me back for everything. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I even drove him to his first GA meeting and waited outside for him. 2 months later, I received a call from my credit card company about suspicious activity. Someone had opened a new card in my name and charged over $5,000 at various electronics stores and online gambling sites. The customer service representative asked if I had authorized anyone to open this account. I knew the answer before I even checked the shipping address for the electronics. They had all been sent to Jake's house. This time when I confronted him, Jake didn't cry. Instead, he became defensive, almost aggressive. "I don't know what you're talking about," he insisted. "Someone must have stolen your identity. It happens to old people all the time. You probably clicked on some scam email." I pulled out the credit card statements I had obtained, showing the shipping address and the IP address that had been used to open the account. "This is your home address, Jake, and this is your computer's digital signature." "Those could be faked," he countered. "And anyway, if someone did this, it was probably Amanda. She handles all our online accounts. I barely know how to check my email." That he would throw his wife under the bus so quickly shocked me, almost as much as the theft itself. Jake had always been protective of those he loved. This willingness to sacrifice others to save himself was a personality trait I didn't recognize. I called an emergency family meeting the next day. Linda came, as did my brother-in-law Robert and Thomas' sister Catherine. Jake arrived looking defensive, while Amanda appeared genuinely confused about why she had been summoned. I laid out everything: the missing jewelry, the pawned bracelet, the fraudulent credit card. Amanda's shock seemed genuine as she turned to stare at her husband. "You opened a credit card. In your mother's name," she whispered, horror evident in her voice. For a moment I felt a flash of sympathy for her, wondering if she too had been deceived by Jake. But that sympathy evaporated with her next words. "How could you be so stupid? If you're going to commit fraud, at least do it properly, using your own address and computer amateur." The room fell silent. It wasn't just that Amanda wasn't surprised by Jake's actions. She was disappointed in his lack of criminal sophistication. Linda was the first to speak. "Ladonna, you need to report this to the police. This is identity theft." Jake jumped up. "You would send your own son to jail over a misunderstanding." $5,000 of fraud is not a misunderstanding," Robert countered. "It's a felony." The argument continued for hours. In the end, I agreed not to press charges if Jake closed the fraudulent account, repaid every penny, and committed to both gambling addiction treatment and financial counseling. He agreed tearfully once again, promising that this was the last time that he would change. After everyone left, Linda stayed behind to help me clean up. "You know he's going to do it again," she said softly, washing dishes beside me. "Addicts don't recover without hitting rock bottom." "Hez my son," I replied, as if that explained everything, and in my mind it did. Over the next few months, Jake seemed to be keeping his promises. He attended GA meetings, started financial counseling, and made small but regular payments toward his debt. During our weekly dinners, he would proudly show me his GA sobriety chips and share insights from his therapy sessions. Amanda, however, grew increasingly distant and irritated. She would make comments about living like peasants and how her friends were all buying new cars and taking exotic vacations while she had to count pennies because of Jake's mistakes. One Sunday dinner, after Jake went to help Thomas' elderly mother with a plumbing issue, Amanda cornered me in the kitchen. "You know," she said, swirling her wine glass, "if you really wanted to help Jake, you'd give us enough money to make a fresh start, a lump sum to clear his gambling debts, and invest in something stable. That's what my parents would do." "I've already given Jake over $150,000, I replied, shocked by her directness. She shrugged. "And look how well that worked out. Small handouts only enable bad habits. A real investment would be different." I realized then that Amanda wasn't an innocent bystander in Jake's financial schemes. She might not have known about the identity theft, but she certainly contributed to the environment of entitlement and material pressure that drove him to such acts. When Jake returned, I watched them interact with new eyes, the way she would subtly compare their lifestyle to her friends, how she would mention designer items she coveted while looking pointedly at Jake. My son, eager to please his demanding wife, would fidget uncomfortably, his eyes darting to me, as if assessing whether I had heard, whether I might offer to help. It was a dynamic I had somehow missed all these years, too blinded by maternal love to see the toxic relationship unfolding before me. That night after they left, I made a decision. No more enabling, no more blind trust. If Jake was going to truly change, he needed to face real consequences for his actions. Little did I know that the universe would soon present me with the perfect opportunity to teach my son the lesson he so desperately needed to learn. The idea came to me during lunch with my friend Sarah, a retired family law attorney who had helped me update my will after Thomas passed. I had been confiding in her about Jake's latest manipulations when she put down her fork and gave me a serious look. "Ladonna, you know I adore you, but you're being played like a fiddle. What Jake needs isn't another chance. He needs a wake-up call." "I can't cut him off completely," I protested. "Hess still, my son." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm not suggesting abandonment. I'm suggesting consequences, real ones." Like what I asked, genuinely curious about what approach I hadn't already tried. "You keep giving him chances based on promises, but promises are just words. You need evidence of his behavior, irrefutable proof that even he can't talk his way around." The plan began to form as Sarah explained. Set a trap, document the betrayal, and use it as leverage for real change, not to punish Jake, but to save him from himself. The next day I visited my bank and spoke with Margaret, the branch manager, who had handled my account since Thomas died. I explained what I needed: a new credit card with a substantial limit, but with special monitoring features. "Every transaction needs to alert me immediately," I explained, "and I need detailed records of when and where the card is used." Margaret looked concerned. "Are you expecting unauthorized use, Ladonna? Because if someone has threatened you—" "Nothing like that," I assured her. "It's a family matter. I'm trying to help someone learn financial responsibility." She didn't seem entirely convinced, but helped me set up a card with a $25,000 limit and comprehensive transaction alerts that would be sent to my phone in real time. She also suggested something I hadn't considered: a discrete tracking feature that would record the location of in-person transactions. Next came the more difficult preparation. I contacted a security company recommended by Sarah and arranged for the installation of a small, nearly invisible camera in my bedroom, positioned to capture my dresser area where I would leave the card. The technician explained how the footage would be stored securely on a cloud server I could access from my phone. "May I ask what you're monitoring for?" he asked as he finished the installation. "Peace of mind," I answered simply. That evening, I called Jake, making sure to sound slightly distressed. "Is everything okay, Mom?" he asked, a note of genuine concern in his voice that made my heart ache. Despite everything, there was still a part of him that cared. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. I just received some unexpected news from the bank today. They approved me for a new high-limit credit card because of my excellent credit history. $25,000. At my age, what would I do with such a high limit?" "That's great, Mom, Jake," said his tone shifting subtly. "You deserve nice things. Maybe you should take a vacation. You haven't traveled since Dad died." "Perhaps," I said. "Anyway, the card should arrive tomorrow. Will you and Amanda come for dinner this weekend? I haven't seen you both in a while." Jake agreed quickly, suggesting they come Friday evening. I could almost hear the calculations happening in his mind. The card arrived on Thursday, and I activated it immediately. I made a single small purchase at the grocery store to ensure the alerts were working properly. Within seconds, my phone buzzed with a notification showing the amount and location. That night, I carefully placed the card in my dresser drawer, making sure it was visible but not obviously displayed. I checked the camera feed on my phone, confirming that the card was clearly visible when the drawer was opened. The final preparation was perhaps the most difficult. I wrote a letter to Jake explaining why I had set this trap and what I hoped would come of it. I sealed it in an envelope, wrote his name on it, and placed it in my safe. Whether I would ever give it to him depended on what happened next. Friday arrived, and I spent the day cooking Jake's favorite meal pot roast with roasted potatoes and homemade apple pie for dessert. As I worked in the kitchen, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness that our relationship had come to this, anger at the repeated betrayals, but mostly a steely determination to finally address the root of the problem. Jake and Amanda arrived at 6 o'clock sharp. Amanda was wearing a new dress that still had the shine of something recently purchased. Jake brought flowers, a peace offering that made me wonder if he felt guilty about what he was planning to do. Dinner conversation was pleasant but strained. Jake asked detailed questions about my catering business finances, something he rarely showed interest in. "Business must be good if the bank offered you such a high credit limit," he commented, trying to sound casual. "Oh, I mentioned that. Did I?" I replied innocently. "Yes, it's quite surprising. I don't even know if he'll keep the card. Seems excessive for someone my age." "You should definitely keep it," Amanda interjected. "Credit availability is important for your financial profile." I nodded, as if considering this sage advice. "The card is in my dresser drawer. I haven't even put it in my wallet yet, not sure where to keep such an important thing." I saw a quick glance between Jake and Amanda. The bait had been taken. As the evening progressed, I made a show of taking my nightly medications, including a sleeping pill that I pretended to swallow but actually tucked under my tongue. I excused myself around 9, claiming the pill was making me drowsy. "You two stay as long as you like," I told them. "Just lock up when you leave. You know where the spare key island?" I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and changed into my nightgown. Then I carefully retrieved the pill from my mouth and flushed it down the toilet. Returning to bed, I positioned myself as if sleeping, but kept my phone close, the security camera app open and muted. The waiting was excruciating. I heard Jake and Amanda moving around the house, their voices too low to make out words. Around 11 things went quiet, and I wondered if they had left. Then, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, according to my phone's clock, I heard the subtle creak of my bedroom door. Through nearly closed eyes, I watched my son tiptoe into my room, moving with the careful precision of someone who had planned this moment. He paused when I shifted slightly, his body tensing. When I settled again, breathing deeply to mimic sleep, he continued toward my dresser. With movements so practiced, they seemed almost professional. Jake eased the drawer open. His fingers quickly located the credit card, and he slipped it into his pocket without making a sound. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with barely a whisper. I lay there in the darkness, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. Despite expecting it, despite planning for it, witnessing my son steal from me while I slept cut deeper than I had anticipated. I heard the front door close a few minutes later, and only then did I allow the tears to come. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now I just had to wait for the consequences to unfold. The house felt emptier than usual after Jake and Amanda left. I didn't sleep for the remainder of the night, instead sitting by my window watching the street, wondering if what I had done was right. Was setting a trap for my own son, an act of love or betrayal? The line between justice and vengeance felt blurry in those quiet hours before dawn. My phone buzzed at 5:23 in the morning, the first transaction alert. With trembling fingers, I opened the notification. Transaction approved Delta Airlines. Amount: 6,842,5. First-class tickets, I thought bitterly. Less than 3 hours after stealing the card, and already nearly $7,000 gone. Where were they planning to go? And more importantly, how quickly had they made this decision? This wasn't an impulsive act in the moment. They had discussed this, planned it. The next alert came at 5:37. Transaction approved, Four Seasons Hotel. Amount $4,975. I did a quick search on my phone. The nearest Four Seasons was in the city, a luxury accommodation that cost more per night than most people in our town made in a week. They weren't even traveling far, just treating themselves to extravagance a mere 30 minutes from home. My phone continued to buzz throughout the early morning. A transaction at an online jewelry store, $3,850 for what the description listed as diamond stud earrings. Another at a designer clothing website, $2,680. By 8 o'clock, the total had surpassed $18,000, and the day had barely begun. Each notification felt like a small betrayal, a confirmation that my suspicions had been correct all along. Jake and Amanda weren't in financial trouble. They were financially irresponsible, spending money they hadn't earned on luxuries they didn't need. At 9, I received a call from Margaret at the bank. "Ladonna," she said, her voice concerned. "I'm seeing some unusual activity on your new card. Nearly $20,000 in purchases since early this morning. I wanted to check if these are authorized." "They're not surprising," I said carefully. "But thank you for checking. Please allow the transactions to continue." "Are you certain?" Margaret pressed. "This is unusual spending behavior for you." "I'm certain," I replied. "Everything is under control." After hanging up, I watched my security footage again. The clear images of Jake entering my room, opening my drawer, taking my card. Evidence that couldn't be explained away or denied. I downloaded the video to a secure folder and made a backup copy on a USB drive that I placed in my safe. The final transaction came through at 11:15. A reservation at an exclusive restaurant downtown for that evening, with a $500 pre-authorization charge. The total now stood at $20, 347.5. In less than 8 hours, Jake and Amanda had spent more than most families in our community lived on for half a year. I spent the afternoon preparing myself emotionally for what was to come. I called Linda and asked her to be available that evening, knowing I would need support after the confrontation. Then I called Thomas' ex-wife, Jake's father, Richard. Though Richard and I had maintained a cordial relationship after the divorce for Jake's sake, we were never close. He had remarried quickly and started a new family, remaining only peripherally involved in Jake's upbringing. His financial contributions had been consistent but minimal, and his emotional presence even less so. "Ladonna," he answered, surprise evident in his voice. "Is everything all right?" "Not exactly," I said. "It's about Jake. I need your help with something important." I explained the situation in broad strokes, not mentioning the trap I had set, but making it clear that Jake had been taking financial advantage of me for years. Richard's response was immediate and defensive. "Jake would never do that to you. He's a good kid, always has been." "Richard, I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. Hess taken over $150,000 from me in the past few years." "Well, you've always been too generous with him," Richard countered. "Maybe you offered and now you're having regrets. You know how you are, Ladonna, always trying to buy people's affection." The accusation stung particularly because there was a grain of truth to it. I had always been generous, perhaps to a fault, but there was a world of difference between generosity and being robbed. "I'm not calling to argue about my parenting style," I said firmly. "I'm calling because I need you to be at my house at 7 tonight. Jake and Amanda will be there, and this needs to be addressed as a family." Richard hesitated, then agreed reluctantly. "Fine. But I still think you're overreacting." After hanging up, I took a moment to collect myself. Richard's dismissive attitude was exactly what Jake would expect from him. In a strange way, it might work in my favor during the confrontation. Jake would expect his father to defend him, to minimize his actions. The surprise when that didn't happen would be all the more impactful. At 6, I received a text from Jake. "Hey, Mom. Hope you slept well. Amanda and I are heading out for a special dinner tonight. Rain check on stopping by this weekend." The casual deception infuriated me. He knew very well I had been home alone all day, having robbed me just hours earlier. Yet here he was, acting as if nothing had happened. I replied simply, "Actually, I need to see you both tonight. It's important. 7 o'clock at my house." His response came quickly. "Everything okay?" "Well, talk when you get here," I wrote back. While waiting, I set up my dining room table with printouts of every transaction made with my credit card that day. I placed my laptop at the head of the table, ready to show the security footage if needed. It felt like preparing for a trial, which in many ways it was. Linda arrived first, giving me a tight hug. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked. "No," I admitted, "but it's necessary." Richard came next, still looking skeptical about the whole situation. He sat stiffly in the living room, checking his watch repeatedly. At 7:15, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I saw Jake helping Amanda out of their car. She was wearing a new dress adorned with what appeared to be the diamond earrings purchased that morning. Jake was similarly well dressed, sporting a new watch that glinted in the early evening light. They entered without knocking, using the key Jake had. Their expressions shifted from surprise to confusion, when they saw Richard and Linda in the living room. "What's going on?" Jake asked, a nervous edge to his voice. "Is this an intervention or something?" In a manner of speaking, I replied calmly, "Please, everyone, let's sit at the dining table. We have important matters to discuss." As everyone took their seats, I remained, standing, gathering strength for what was to come. The weight of 20 years of motherhood, of sacrifices made and trust betrayed, pressed down on my shoulders. But beneath that weight was a newfound resolve. This ended tonight. The tension in the dining room was palpable as everyone settled into their seats. Amanda kept touching her new earrings nervously while Jake drummed his fingers on the table, eyes darting between his father and me. Linda sat quietly beside me, a steady presence, offering silent support. I took a deep breath and began. "Last night something terrible happened," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Someone broke into my bedroom while I was sleeping and stole my new credit card." Jake shifted in his seat but said nothing. By this morning, over $20,000 had been charged to the card. First-class airline tickets, hotel reservations, jewelry, designer clothes. Amanda's hand dropped from her earring, and she shot a quick glance at Jake. "That's awful," Mom Jake said, his face a mask of concern. "Have you called the police?" The audacity of his response, the ease with which he could lie to my face while wearing items purchased with my stolen card momentarily took my breath away. "Not yet," I replied. "I wanted to understand who would do such a thing first." "It was probably one of those catering staff you hire," Richard interjected. "You've always been too trusting with strangers in your home, Ladonna." I turned to Richard, a small, sad smile on my face. That was my first thought, too. But then I remembered something. I reached for my laptop and turned it to face the table. 3 years ago, after the incident with my tennis bracelet, I had security cameras installed in my bedroom. The color drained from Jake's face. "Would anyone like to see the footage from last night?" I asked, my finger hovering over the play button. "It's quite clear. Recorded at exactly 3:17 in the morning." "This is ridiculous," Jake said, standing abruptly. "We don't need to see anything. Obviously, someone broke in. You should call the police, file a report, and let the credit card company handle it." "Sit down," Linda said firmly. It was the first time she had spoken, and the authority in her voice surprised everyone. Jake slowly sank back into his chair. I pressed play. The footage was undeniable. Jake tiptoeing into my room, careful not to wake me, opening my drawer with practiced ease, taking the credit card, leaving as quietly as he had come. When the video ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Amanda stared at Jake with an expression that mixed shock and fury. Richard sat stunned, his earlier certainty shattered by the irrefutable evidence before him. Richard finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "What were you thinking?" Jake looked, cornered, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. "It's not what it looks like," he began. "Then what is it?" I asked. "Because it looks like you stole from your sleeping mother." "We were going to pay it back," he insisted. "It was just a loan. We've been under so much financial pressure lately." Amanda made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a scoff. "Financial pressure? We make over $200,000 a year combined. The only pressure is keeping up with your gambling and my shopping." Jake shot her a betrayed look. "Seriously, you're throwing me under the bus. Who wanted those earrings? Who insisted on the 4 seasons instead of visiting your parents?" As they turned on each other, I placed the transaction printouts on the table one by one. Delta Airlines, $6,842.50, 4 Seasons Hotel. $4,975. Tiffany & Co., $3,850. With each statement, Jake seemed to shrink further into himself. In total, $20,347.50 spent in less than 8 hours after stealing my card. "I'll pay it back," Jake said weakly. "All of it. I promise." "Like you promised to pay back the $150,000 you've taken from me over the years," I asked. "Like you promised to stop gambling. Like you promised the fraudulent credit card was the last time." Jake had no response. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he couldn't talk his way out of the situation. "I trusted you, Jake." I continued, my voice breaking slightly. "Even after the pawned jewelry. Even after the identity theft. I believed you could change because that's what mothers do. We believe in our children even when all evidence points to the contrary." Richard cleared his throat. "Ladonna, what do you want to happen here? Should I call the police?" The question hung in the air. Jake looked up, genuine fear in his eyes. "No," I said finally. "I don't want my son to go to jail. What I want is for him to face consequences for once in his life." I reached into my purse and pulled out a document that Sarah had helped me prepare. This is a repayment agreement. It states that Jake and Amanda will repay the full amount charged to my credit card within 30 days. Additionally, they will begin making monthly payments toward the previous money taken with a reasonable interest rate. "And if we don't?" Amanda asked, her voice cold. "Then I'll file charges for credit card theft, which the video clearly shows, and identity theft for the previous fraudulent card." Sarah assures me that with the evidence I have, conviction would be nearly certain. "You would send your own son to prison?" Richard asked, sounding shocked. "Would you prefer I continue enabling behavior that's destroying him?" I countered. "Because that's what I've been doing for years. Protecting him from consequences hasn't helped him. It's only made things worse." Linda nodded in agreement. "Jake needs help, not more bailouts." Jake looked defeated, all pretense gone. "Where am I supposed to get $20,000 in 30 days?" he asked quietly. "The same place you got the money to buy those things," I replied, gesturing to his new watch, "and Amanda's earrings. Return them. Cancel the hotel reservation. Get refunds on the airline tickets." "Most of it is non-refundable," Amanda said, a note of panic entering her voice. "We'd lose thousands." "Then you'll need to find another way," I said firmly. "Sell your second car. Take out a personal loan. Get a weekend job. Figure it out like the rest of the world does when they want something they can't afford." Jake looked at his father imploringly. "Dad, can you help us out here? Just this once." Richard was silent for a long moment, looking between Jake and me. Finally, he shook his head. "No, son. Your mother is right. This has gone on long enough." The shock on Jake's face at his father's refusal was almost comical. He had clearly expected Richard to rescue him, to undermine my authority, as he had done so many times during Jake's childhood. "So that's it?" Jake asked, a hint of his old defiance returning. "Either we sign this agreement or Mom presses charges." "Those are the options I'm presenting." "Yes," I confirmed. "But there's one more condition that isn't in the document." Everyone looked at me expectantly. "Therapy," I said simply. "Real therapy. Not just Gamblers Anonymous, though, that too. But professional help for whatever is driving this behavior, and financial counseling for both of you." "I don't need therapy," Amanda protested. "This was Jake's idea, not mine." Perhaps I acknowledged. "But you participated. You're wearing the evidence on your ears right now." Amanda touched her earrings again, this time looking embarrassed. "I want my son back," I said, my voice softening. "The compassionate boy who used to help me prepare for catering jobs. the young man who called every Sunday during college. Somewhere along the way, he got lost. I want to help him find his way back, but I can't do that by continuing to be his victim." Jake was quiet for a long time, staring at the agreement on the table. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll sign it." As he reached for the pen, Amanda stood up abruptly. "This is insane. I'm not signing anything. My parents will help us. They always do." "Your parents already know," I said quietly. Amanda froze. "What?" "I called them this afternoon, told them everything, showed them the footage. They agreed with my approach completely." This wasn't entirely true. I hadn't called Amanda's parents, but the bluff worked. Amanda sank back into her chair, the fight gone out of her. One by one, they signed the agreement. Jake, Amanda, Richard, and Linda as witnesses. And finally, me. When it was done, Jake looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed, but clearer than I'd seen them in years. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I don't know when I became this person." "Neither do I replied honestly. "But starting tonight, we work on becoming something different, something better." As everyone prepared to leave, the atmosphere had shifted from tense confrontation to exhausted resolution. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet, but it was a beginning, a chance for change. And for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for my son's future. The days following our confrontation were eerily quiet. Jake and Amanda returned the items they could and canceled the reservations that allowed refunds. In total, they managed to recover about $12,000, leaving them $8,000 short of what was due within the 30-day window. 1 week after signing the agreement, Jake called and asked if he could come see me alone. When he arrived, I barely recognized him. Gone was the designer clothing and carefully styled hair. Instead, he wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, his hair unstyled, dark circles under his eyes. "Amanda left," he said, without preamble, as he sat at my kitchen table. "Moved back in with her parents temporarily. Says she needs to reevaluate our relationship." I poured him a cup of coffee and sat across from him. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I had never wished for my son's marriage to fail. "Don't be," Jake replied, staring into his coffee. "She made it clear that she was only staying if I could maintain our lifestyle. When I told her I had to sell my Audi to help cover what we owe you, she packed her bags." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "That must be painful." Jake looked up, a sad smile on his face. "The weird thing is, it's almost a relief. Do you know how exhausting it is to constantly chase money to keep someone else happy, to feel like your value as a husband is tied to what you can provide?" It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Jake explained how his relationship with Amanda had gradually transformed him, how her constant comparisons to her wealthy friends had made him feel inadequate, how gambling had started as a way to make quick money to fund their lifestyle, but quickly spiraled into an addiction. "That doesn't excuse what I did to you," he added quickly. "Nothing could excuse that. I'm just trying to understand it myself." "Have you started therapy?" I asked. Jake nodded. 2 sessions so far. The therapist says I have a lot to unpack. Apparently living a double life, respectable architect by day, thief, and gambler by night, takes a psychological toll. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What about the financial counseling?" "First appointment is tomorrow. They're going to help me create a budget and a repayment plan for everything I owe, not just to you but to some other people as well." The hesitation in his voice concerned me. "Jake, are you in debt To dangerous people? He looked away. Nothing I can't handle now that I'm facing it head on. The counselor said, transparency is key. So here's the full truth I owe. About 40,000 to various credit cards, 10,000 to online gambling sites, and another 15 to a guy who runs poker games downtown. My heart sank at the extent of his financial troubles. $65,000, plus what you owe me, plus the $8,000 still due on your card, Jake confirmed. So about $225,000 total. The number was staggering. How will you ever pay all that back? Jake straightened his shoulders slightly. I've got a plan. I'm selling the house. It's too big for just me anyway, and there's enough equity to cover most of the debt. I'm moving into a studio apartment near work to cut expenses, and I've taken a second job drafting floor plans for a construction company on weekends. His determination surprised me. This was a side of Jake I hadn't seen since he was working his way through college. What about Amanda? Won't she object to selling the house? It's in my name, Jake said. Another thing she insisted on because her credit wasn't great when we bought it. Ironic, considering everything that's happened. Over the next few weeks, a new routine developed. Jake would come by every Sunday, not for me to cook for him as in the past, but to share the burden of preparing a meal together. During these cooking sessions, he would update me on his progress therapy, insights, financial counseling developments, GA meetings. Richard, surprisingly, became more involved. He helped Jake navigate the house sale and even co-signed the lease for Jake's new apartment when landlords were hesitant due to his credit history. It was the most engaged Richard had been in Jake's life since the divorce. Why the sudden interest in being a father? I asked Richard one day when he stopped by to drop off some furniture for Jake's new place. Richard looked embarrassed. When I saw that video of Jake stealing from you, it was like looking in a mirror. The entitled behavior, the easy lies, the using people who care about you. That was me 20 years ago. That's why our marriage failed. His honesty caught me off guard. You've changed, I observed. Losing you and becoming a part-time father to Jake was my rock bottom, Richard admitted. I didn't want Jake to need the same wake-up call. I thought if I just stayed positive and supportive, he'd turn out fine. I was wrong. He needed boundaries, not cheerleading. 3 weeks after our confrontation, Amanda returned, but not with reconciliation in mind. She arrived at my house unannounced, dressed impeccably as always, but with a hardness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Jake says, "You're making him sell the house," she accused, without greeting. "I'm not making Jake do anything," I replied calmly. "He's making his own decisions now. He says he owes you over $150,000. That's ridiculous. You're his mother. You're supposed to help him, not bleed him dry." I invited her in, but she remained standing in the doorway. Amanda, the money Jake took from me was my retirement savings. Money I earned catering events with arthritic hands and aching feet. I'm not trying to punish Jake. I'm trying to teach him that actions have consequences. "So, you're going to let him throw away our marriage for a lesson?" she demanded. Is that what he's doing? Or is he finally becoming someone who takes responsibility for his choices? Amanda's expression faltered for a moment. "You have no idea what it's like to be married to someone who can't provide the life you deserve." "Actually, I do," I said gently. "Thomas wasn't always the successful accountant you heard about. We struggled for years while he built his practice. We lived in a tiny apartment, drove old cars, and counted every penny, but we were happy because we were building something together." Amanda was quiet for a moment, seemingly considering my words. Then her expression hardened again. "Well, I didn't sign up for struggle. I'm filing for divorce." After she left, I called Jake immediately to warn him. He took the news with surprising calm. "I expected it," he said. "The therapist helped me see that our relationship was built on a fantasy neither of us could sustain. It hurts, but it's for the best." By the end of the 30-day period, Jake had sold his Audi returned or resold most of the items purchased with my card and borrowed the remaining amount from Richard to meet the deadline. He presented me with a cashier's check for the full $20,347.50. "This is just the beginning," he said, as I accepted the check. "I've worked out a payment plan for the rest, $500 a month until it's paid off. It'll take years, but I'll get there." "I know you will," I said, and for the first time in a long time I truly believed it. The house sold quickly, and as Jake had predicted, the equity covered most of his remaining debts. He moved into his studio apartment, furnished with second-hand items, and a few pieces from his childhood bedroom that I had kept all these years. The divorce proceedings began with Amanda demanding alimony, despite the short duration of their marriage. Jake's attorney, recommended by Sarah, successfully argued against it, given the circumstances of their separation and Amanda's family wealth. 5 months after our confrontation, Jake invited me to dinner at his apartment. It was small but impeccably organized, with architectural drawings covering one wall and GA sobriety chips displayed proudly on a shelf. "I wanted you to see how I'm living now," he said as he served a simple but well-prepared meal. "It's not fancy, but it's honest. Everything here I've earned." As we ate, Jake shared news that made my heart swell with pride. "The therapy has been really helpful. I haven't gambled in 5 months, and I've been promoted at work lead architect on a new community center project." "That's wonderful, Jake," I said, noticing how his eyes lit up when he talked about his work, something I hadn't seen in years. "There's something else," he added, suddenly serious. "I've been thinking about what you did setting that trap with the credit card. At first I was angry, felt betrayed even. But now I understand it was the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." "Kindest," I echoed, surprised by his choice of words. "You could have kept enabling me, kept trying to protect me from myself. That would have been easier for both of us in the short term. Instead, you chose the harder path because you knew it was what I needed. That's real love, isn't it? Doing what's necessary, not what's easy." In that moment, looking at my son across his humble table in his modest apartment, I saw the man he was becoming: honest, responsible, self-aware. The painful trap I had set had served its purpose. It had helped Jake find his way back to himself. 1 year has passed since that night when I lay awake, watching my son take my credit card in the darkness. In that year, everything has changed. Yet somehow everything has also come full circle. The divorce between Jake and Amanda was finalized 6 months ago. It was messy at times, with Amanda fighting for assets that no longer existed, but eventually she accepted the settlement and moved back to her hometown. I sometimes wonder if she too might be reflecting on the role she played in their downfall. But that's her journey to make, not mine. Jake has maintained his sobriety from gambling for the full year. His collection of GA chips has grown, marking each milestone with quiet pride. He still attends meetings twice weekly and has begun mentoring newer members, sharing his story to help others avoid the same pitfalls. The financial recovery has been slower but steady. Jake continues to make his monthly payments to me without fail, often including handwritten notes, with the checks sharing small victories or insights from his ongoing therapy. The total has barely made a dent in what he owes, but the consistency speaks volumes about his commitment to making amends. His career has flourished now that his energy isn't divided between work and hiding an addiction. The community center he designed won a regional architecture award, and his firm has given him increasingly significant projects. He still lives in the same studio apartment, though he's gradually replaced the second-hand furniture with carefully selected modest pieces that reflect his emerging sense of self. Richard has remained present in Jake's life in a way he never was during childhood. They meet for breakfast every Saturday morning, rebuilding a father-son relationship that had been superficial for decades. Richard even attended family therapy sessions with Jake, working through old wounds that had contributed to Jake's issues with money and self-worth. As for me, the journey has been equally transformative. The initial pain of betrayal has softened into a complex understanding that parenting never really ends, it just evolves. I've had to examine my own role in enabling Jake's behavior for so many years, the ways in which my guilt over the divorce and desire to be the good parent led me to confuse indulgence with love. I joined a support group for parents of adult children with addiction issues. The stories I heard there helped me realize I wasn't alone in my struggles. So many parents had fallen into the same trap of enabling out of love only to watch their children sink deeper into destructive patterns. Through shared experiences and gentle guidance, I learned healthier ways to support Jake without rescuing him from the natural consequences of his actions. The most profound change came 3 months ago when Jake invited me to a special dinner at his apartment. He had prepared a meal similar to the ones I used to make for Sunday family dinners. When I arrived, I found the table set with my mother's china, which I had given him when he first moved out on his own. "I saved these," he explained, touching the plates gently. "Even during the worst times when I was pawning everything else, I couldn't bring myself to part with them. They reminded me of who I used to be, who I wanted to be again someday." During dinner, Jake presented me with an envelope. Inside was a check for $20,000, an extra lump sum payment toward his debt. "How did you manage this?" I asked, stunned by the amount. "I've been working on a side project, designing tiny houses," he explained, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "It finally paid off. I know it doesn't make up for everything, but I wanted you to know that I'm serious about making things right." What moved me most wasn't the money itself, but what it represented. Jake wasn't just going through the motions of recovery. He was actively working to rebuild his life and repair the damage he had caused. After dinner, we sat on his small balcony watching the sunset. It reminded me of similar evenings with Thomas, simple moments that contained their own kind of wealth. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately," Jake said, as if reading my thoughts, "about what he would think of everything that's happened." "He would be proud of you now," I said without hesitation. "Not because you're successful or because you're paying back the money, but because you're facing your demons instead of running from them. That takes real courage." Jake was quiet for a moment. "You know what I realized in therapy? Dad left me a legacy, but it wasn't the one I thought. I spent years trying to live up to this image of success. I thought he would want the big house, the expensive car, the perfect wife. But his real legacy was integrity. The way he built his business honestly, the way he treated people fairly. I missed that completely." "We both did, in different ways," I admitted. "I think after he died, I tried to fill the void by giving you everything, as if things could replace his presence." That conversation marked a turning point in our healing process. For the first time, we were able to look at the past with clear eyes, neither minimizing the harm done nor dwelling in guilt and recrimination. We were finally able to see each other as complete people, flawed, resilient, and worthy of second chances. Today, as I reflect on the journey of the past year, I understand that the trap I set wasn't just for Jake. It was for both of us. It forced us to confront patterns that had been destroying our relationship for years. The credit card I left in that drawer was bait. Yes. But not to punish, it was to illuminate what had been hidden in shadow for too long. The road ahead remains long. Jake still has years of payments to make. He still attends therapy and GA meetings. He still lives with the consequences of his actions, including a damaged credit score and a failed marriage. But he walks this road with integrity, now one step at a time, eyes open. As for me, I've learned perhaps the hardest lesson a mother can learn, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your child is to stop protecting them from themselves. Real love isn't always gentle or comfortable. Sometimes it's firm boundaries, painful honesty, and the courage to watch someone you love struggle because you know that's the only way they'll grow. The trap I set that night wasn't an act of betrayal. It was an act of faith. Faith that somewhere beneath the layers of deception and addiction, my real son still existed. Faith that when confronted with the truth, he would find the strength to choose a better path. Faith that our relationship could survive the painful process of healing. That faith has been rewarded in ways I couldn't have imagined on that dark night a year ago. Not with perfection, but with progress. Not with easy solutions, but with honest efforts. Not with the Hollywood ending of all debts magically erased, but with the real-world satisfaction of watching someone you love find their way back to themselves one day at a time. Sometimes setting a trap is the only way to set someone free. Have you ever had to use tough love with someone you care about? Leave a comment below sharing your experience. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons from someone who's learned them the hard way. And remember, sometimes, the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately save the relationships we treasure most. Thank you for listening to my story today, and I wish you wisdom and courage in your own family journeys.